Thank you. So my topic is Sufism, Awakening in Life Beyond Returning. So I'd like to begin with reading from Pir Vilayat Inayat Khan, who was my teacher and Diane's teacher for 25 years. Bearing in mind that the human condition is just a developmental stage in the evolutionary march, can you sense in yourself a longing to awaken beyond the human condition? Can you feel the evolutionary drive spurring you on? Can you see that if the initial springhead behind the whole evolutionary drive is the very freedom that resonates with your pristine celestial nature, then the cosmos envisioned as one being, which is meant by God. And incidentally, Pir Vilayat would usually use universe with a capital U instead of God, because the term God has gotten so many different connotations. Anyway, that this converges in each being. This is the holistic model. If this is so, then the more we converge of the bounty of the universe, the more self-sufficient we become. Think of yourself as aiming at becoming gradually a spin-off in which the universe rethinks and reconstructs itself. So what is Sufism? Sufism is, if you look it up online, you'll probably find the mystical branch of Islam, but actually Sufism is an ancient wisdom tradition that dates back to the Egyptian mystery schools, the tradition of the Magi, and draws from mysticism of many different traditions, Zoroastrianism, and spread to India and had followers who were Buddhists and yogis. So unlike Buddhism and yoga, which seek liberation from manifestation and dissolution of personal identity, Sufism is a path of awakening in life, honoring the uniqueness of each individual and their contribution to the evolution of divinity in existence. And the Sufis say that any sincere seeker of wisdom is a Sufi, whether they call themselves that or not. So it's not particular to any religion. Sufis have welcomed followers of all religions, or no particular belief system. There's no dogma. There are many Sufi orders, many of which are Muslim, but there are also Sufi orders, and the one that Diane and I belong to, which is called the Inayatiya, is a more universal order that isn't particular to any one religion. And just as Sufism draws from the wisdom of all the different traditions, so does our Unitarian Universalism tradition, which draws from many sources, including wisdom from the world's religions and spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions, which celebrate the sacred circle of life. Everything is seen as an expression of divinity, in keeping with the UU principle of respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are all a part. And it's also an evolutionary path. It doesn't have just some fixed body of teachings, but it draws from science as well as from religion. And Henri Corbin, who brought Sufism to the West, said there cannot be one truth for mysticism and another one for science. They're just different ways of approaching something that's beyond any words. So we generally take as unquestioned the description of reality, including that of God in religion, which has been at the core of belief systems and spiritual traditions. However, God is described whether as a being or as the absolute or transcendent. God generally, or whatever term you put in, is believed to be unchanging, which transformation occurring only in manifestation. But quantum physics has shown us that there's an uncertainty in existence, and it's impossible to know with certainty what's going to arise. Einstein had trouble accepting this. He said, does God play dice with the universe? And apparently so. But our thinking, not just in religion, but generally our outlook in the world, is still back based on a Newtonian notion of things. The Newtonian notion of God is one of being unchanging and omniscient. But in the quantum universe in which everything exists, it's inconceivable that there could be something, whatever you want to call it, existing in isolation from the universe. Or it's inconceivable that there could be something outside of existence that could possibly know that everything that was ever going to happen. There's the uncertainty principle. It's impossible to know what's going to emerge. There are probabilities of what's going to happen. So there arises the question, why is there existence in the first place? Well, both science and religion have struggled with this question. Science from the Big Bang, well, what brought about the Big Bang? And there are various theories. There was a break of symmetry in a higher dimensional order that arose in the Big Bang, but no one could possibly know. And questions like, well, what was time before the Big Bang, which is a meaningless question because time has no meaning before there was existence. What do the Sufis say about why is there existence? They say that God was a hidden treasure desiring to be known, to love, and to be loved, and so brought about an existence. And how does God know him, herself? God can only know him, herself through the relationship with everything in manifestation. And that knowledge can't possibly be something that's just sitting there, it's already cooked and done, and you're just trying to find the right book and open it up. It's an emergent wisdom that can't be known by anything beforehand, but even more remarkably, each of us contributes to that unfolding knowledge in a unique way. Ibn Arabi, who's one of the greatest mystics that ever been, said that every individual, every soul has access to a unique aspect of wisdom that no other soul ever could or will have access to. And this is a remarkable statement. And he said that God told the Prophet Muhammad that even the Prophet Muhammad had to learn something from his followers because each of them had access to a wisdom that even the Prophet Muhammad couldn't know. And we can generalize this to notions like, well, I used to think in Buddhism, well, I want to become enlightened like the Buddha, because if I'm enlightened, I will know everything. The Buddha knew everything. Well, the Buddha knew everything that the Buddha could possibly know from the current state of the Buddha, but what could be known is not fixed and was going to continue to emerge. But each of us potentially has access to a wisdom that the Buddha could not know, access to a wisdom that Christ could not possibly know, or any other being. And to me, this is such an ennobling of the human being, and such an antidote to low self-esteem and despair. Well, what do I matter? Why do I make a difference? We have something we can bring forth that nothing in the history, past, present, or future of the universe could possibly bring. And the wisdom that accrues from that is not only a benefit to ourselves, but it becomes available to everything else in existence. So revelation is not a discovery of something pre-existent. Revelation is a discovery of something that is emergent, that was not there before. And this is a very different way of thinking about things. Pir Vilayat would talk about, so often we are driven by a causality notion of existence, and this is true of, tends to be true of yoga and Buddhism, with notions of karma and samskaras, that we are bound to work through the effects of all that we've done, and if you believe in past lives, even from past lives, not just this one. And it's only when we can free ourselves from all of this that we can become liberated and go beyond this manifestation. Well, a very different way of looking at existence is that, well, I'll segue over to mystical Judaism, because in mystical Judaism, in the Kabbalah, it talks about originally there was this pure, uncreated light that went through all the realms and became the substance of everything in manifestation, but the light got broken into shards, broken into pieces. And so the task of the human being is to recollect this light and restore it to its original form. Well, a Sufi might say about this, well, you could look at it in that way, You could think of healing as you want to restore yourself to a state of health before you got sick. But beyond that, there's transformation, getting to a higher state of being than you were in to start with. It's not just a matter of getting back to where you were, it's going beyond that. So instead of thinking of these broken shards of light as something to put back together again, like a pot that fell apart and you're going to glue it together, imagine that each of these shards are possibilities that exist in manifestation that are unique to each person. They're like seeds. And what do you want to do with a seed? Well, you don't want to grind it up and distill it into its chemical elements and go, okay, now I've got carbon, sulfur, this and that. You certainly haven't fulfilled the purpose of the seed. If you do that, you want to allow it to become a plant. And furthermore, the seed itself mutates. It transforms, just like our DNA transforms into something. We can become more than what was the state of things before. So instead of thinking of the purpose of life, as it's often described in religion, as achieving a state in yoga, moksha, mukti, Buddhism, nirvana, Christianity, salvation, whatever term you want to put, but it's usually thought of as getting away from here to something that's better than this. And instead of that, this is actually the ground of transformation for emergence of something more than's ever been before. And however you want to describe this oneness that underlies everything that's interconnected, call it God, call it divinity, call it in quantum physics the entanglement of everything with each other, the purposes of further emergence. So Seth Lloyd, who's a computer scientist at MIT, this was in Scientific American, said that he believes the whole universe is like a giant quantum computer. And what is this quantum computer computing? Again, this is Scientific American. He said itself. He was saying in different words, this universe is seeking to understand itself through the emergence of what takes place with everything that's in there. Okay, so manifestation is not seen in Sufism as illusory or something to be transcended. It's not viewed as something which is a fall from grace. It's not seen as something that you just have to burn the effects of the past to get to something else. Back to Pure Light, he talked about a purpose-oriented way of looking at the universe. What's the forward thrust? What's the pull towards something more than what's been before that each of us has a possibility of contributing to? And how do we contribute to this? Well, it's not necessarily by being or doing things that you think of as spiritual. Well, I'm going to do more meditation. I'm going to become a holier person. It's by living our dharma. Dharma is a term in both Buddhism and Hinduism, which means our purpose or sacred duty in life. And how do we fulfill our dharma? By expressing the deepest passion of our soul. Not dissolving ourselves, not getting rid of desire. Desire can certainly lead us astray, but the Sufis talk about every desire begins with a divine impulse, and that impulse can be distorted 180 degrees on the way down to our consciousness. But our task is to align ourselves with that original desire, but not just bring it forth the way it was. We have something to do with transforming that desire into something more than what was possible before. And that could be by what makes us feel the most alive in our life. It could be through art, music, poetry, dance, science, service, whatever it might be, being in nature, just living from the heart. In Sufism, sometimes people say, well, is this a religion? And Hasranat Khan said, no, it's not a religion, but if you call it a religion, it's the religion of the heart. We all have that. And the heart is like the meeting place between the manifest and the transcendent. If you're familiar with the Kabbalah, the Sephiroth, the Tree of Life, the mid-station is Tipharoth, and Tipharoth corresponds to the heart, and it's the midpoint between all that's transcendent and all that's manifest. And it's where those two come together that the new possibilities arise. It's not by just going all the way up and dissolving. It's not by just being caught up in a dualistic state of being. And in a dualistic state of being, we experience ourselves as being disconnected from things, disconnected from whatever we think of as the source of our existence, but disconnected from each other, disconnected from life, disconnected from the world. But that's not the true nature of the world. I lately have come to describe this as that's a simulation that we tend to live in. We live in a simulation of duality, and the actual reality is we're deeply interconnected with everything else. And I like to say that everything is a portal or an open to the sacred, without exception. Does that mean some terrible situation is magically going to become wonderful and beautiful just because we're finding a different way of relating to it? No. It may be the external circumstances don't change one bit, but by our way of relating to that, we can find a way of opening up some new possibility that was not there before that can bring about transformation in that situation. And each of us has a unique way of doing that. We can think of ourselves as each being part of a vast cosmic neural network, each part of which has the potential to enable new possibilities, not only for ourselves, but for everything in existence. I previously gave a talk here called Awakening as Service to Humanity. And I could have called it Awakening as Service to the Universe. So the initial motivation for people entering a spiritual path is generally, well, I want to become illuminated, I want to become enlightened, I want to have mystical experiences, but you're thinking about what benefit is going to be for you. But at a certain point along the way, you realize, well, that was kind of like the impetus to get you going, but in reality, you are part of an emergence in all of existence that you have a unique way of plugging into and contributing to, and what you do is a benefit to everything else, and vice versa is true of that. So again, one of the UU sources is the direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. So if we're going to fulfill our Dharma, then one guideline would be noticing what are the times and ways that we feel most alive in the world. What are the times that we feel most connected, whether it's with another person, whether it's with nature, whether it's with the stars in the sky at night, whatever it might be, this beautiful story that Tess read about the garden, whether it might be with plants. I have this little tropical plant that I've had now for several years, and when I first got it, it was in sad shape. But I decided, well, I'm going to really just love this plant. And this plant just blossomed. It's been going strong for years, and lately it was not doing so well, and Diane reminded me, well, it needs some fertilizer. So I put some fertilizer in it, but plants respond to us, our thoughts and our intentions. Everything responds to that. The Sufis have an invocation toward the One, the perfection of love, harmony and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance. And that term messenger, you might think, well, that means it's just Jesus, it's just Buddha, and so on. It's just these great beings, not me. But each of us is an aspect of the messenger. Each of us, when we can align ourselves with harmony in our lives, when we can align ourselves with bringing something forth that makes us feel more fully alive and triggers that spark of life in other people, then we become a part of that messenger. We become a part of that catalyst of awakening that ripples through the whole universe. So here's another quote from Hazrat Inayat Khan. As everything in the objective world has its tendency to rise upwards, so the tendency of the soul can be seen in human aspiration, which always soars upwards, whatever be the sphere of one's consciousness. One who's only conscious of the material life, their aspirations reach as far as they can reach in material gains. If they proceed higher and higher and remain discontented with all that they achieve through life, owing to the immensity of life in every phase. This craving for the attainment of what is unattainable gives the soul a longing to reach life's utmost heights. It is the nature of the soul to try and discover what is behind the veil. It is the soul's constant longing to climb heights which are beyond their power. It is the desire of the soul to see something that it has never seen. It is the constant longing of the soul to know something it has never known. But the most wonderful thing about it is that the soul already knows there is something behind this veil, the veil of perplexity, that there's something to be sought for in the highest spheres of life, that there's some beauty to be seen, that there is someone to be known who is knowable. This desire, this longing is not acquired. This desire is a dim knowledge of the soul which it has in itself. So there's so many problems in the world which seem insurmountable, but this is only true if the general consciousness is one of duality and separation. We are not meant to be passive witnesses in the unfoldment of new creation. So the Sufis say there's a new creation born at every instant. The physicists say the same thing. They say time is not continuous. There's a Planck unit of time, the smallest gap of time, and shorter than that, you can't talk about it. So there's like instant, and the next instant, and the next instant. But it's like when you watch a movie, it seems continuous, but if you look at the film, it's this cell, and this cell, and this cell. So it's born anew at every instant, but what our consciousness tends to do is replay the way that things have been and become blind to seeing all the fresh possibilities that are alive at that very instant. Every instant is an opportunity for awakening of our being. As more and more people awaken to their own sense of divinity, or whatever you want to call it, or possibilities yet unknown, by aligning their consciousness with many others with similar intentions, then solutions will be found for problems that have plagued humanity for centuries. Gabriel is usually viewed as a divine messenger, bringing something from above to the world. But in fact, each of us, in a way, is like Gabriel, with something to be revealed through our relationships with everyone and everything we encounter. Similarly, we receive openings to revelations from everything that we experience in life, and these revelations are new, not only for us, but for God or for the totality. Everything evolves, including however we think about or describe the wholeness of existence, whether we call it God or the universe. So may we each live in a way to fulfill our dharma. And the Zoroastrians, when they're teenagers, take a pledge that they will devote themselves to help bring about the transformation of the archangel of the earth. So maybe we all work towards bringing about a transformation of this world, so this world becomes the vision that we aspire to. Thank you.